as the session said, this is the first of a brand new series, and I'm thrilled to actually have Ursula here today to join us. We decided, the task force and I got together a couple of months ago, and we really wanted to showcase some of the people who are really leading the way in the industry. And many of you will know I don't necessarily always go for the women only thing, but actually this time around I really just wanted to celebrate the females in this community, because we have some amazing people out there. And as we go through our journey of our own careers, I think it's always really nice to hear how other people have done what they've done to get to where they are, and what drives them, and we can all learn something from each other. So today I have great pleasure in welcoming Ursula. Ursula is a partner at KPMG, newly appointed. So a huge congratulations, Ursula. And maybe just to get started, because it's very informal, just so everyone knows, we're going to do a Q&A afterwards, but feel free. If there's a question that you want to ask during our talk with Ursula, please feel free to get involved. But Ursula, to maybe kick it off, could I ask you just to give a little bit of an overview about who you are and what you do at KPMG?
Yeah, no worries. So whenever I'm introducing myself and I say that I've been in mobility, working at KPMG for almost 17 years now, always in the same group, it sounds a little boring, but as we all know, careers in this space are constantly evolving. So I came to Australia in 2005 and started working as a casual doing tax returns here, actually in the Sydney office, and just fell in love with this space. I think because of, the variety of people that we meet, and it's constantly changing, and we're always providing a useful service. So the service that I provide is one that gives tax advice and policy advice and remuneration and structuring of packages, that kind of space where we advise clients and individuals who want to move around the world. So making that a bit easier for them.
Fantastic. So if we look back, let's start at the very beginning, because obviously there's been lots of years leading up to this, but what were you like when you were growing up? Were there any aspects of your childhood that influenced how your career has unfolded?
Yeah, so I'm one of four. My mother, who, if you follow me on LinkedIn, you would have seen she's visiting from the US, and I got to bring her to the office, and she was very excited about that. She had four children. My oldest sister is 9 years older than I am, and she was kind of like my second mom. So she was quite bossy and told us what to do a lot. We're steps, like there's me, and then my sister's 18 months younger than me, and then my younger brother's 13 months younger than her. So my mom was crazy, if you ask me. But but we grew up very, very close, and my older sister was older. And so I kind of always aspired to be like the one in charge and the one in control and the one telling all the little kids what to do, which I think kind of shaped how I saw the world function. Like there was someone who was the leader. And I really yearned for that to be me when I was a little kid, and she was bossing us around or telling us what to do or controlling the TV. So when she went off to university, it was my opportunity to kind of be the leader of our little kid pack. And I loved helping my little brother and sister. And, when we would go to the park, we'd do things together. When we go to the shops, I'd be the one paying the money because I was not afraid to talk to the teller. So I think growing up, being not afraid to speak to people and get out there and lead, even if it was just, my 6-year-old brother, that's probably had a little bit of an impact on me.
It's funny how that can happen. How important do you think building your own knowledge and your networks has been when it comes to helping you feel confident as a leader?
Well, you're not a leader if no one's following. So I think you have to be in touch with yourself and the people around you. So I think for me, and particularly with moving down to Melbourne and really not knowing anyone, both internally at KPMG and externally in the market, for me, network is really important. And it's not just about professional network, it's personal as well, because you guys can all probably attest, if you don't have, you know, a release valve and someone you can call and complain if you have a bad day, or, you know, all of that, then you're not a happy person. So probably one of the benefits of me being so extroverted and ready to get out there is that I've been able to meet some really amazing people and start to build some connections and have some friends as well, because that's really important.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I've been watching you on LinkedIn. I digress, but I've been watching you on LinkedIn, and some of the things that you've posted, it's been very clear that you've actually been very conscious about creating a persona outside of the work environment.
Yeah, look, I'm a part of a board observership program, which I think is a fantastic experience, because I'm meeting people. I met someone the other day who like played guitar, and that he was an artist and that was his job. And he was observing a not-for-profit board that was in the music space. And so just getting to connect with somebody who is not in this group of people and outside the mobility world is so important. So yeah, I'm really loving the opportunity to meet just a wide array of people.
Yeah, yeah, it's fantastic. So tell us a bit about your first boss. What were they like, and what did you learn from them about managing people?
Yeah, look, it's funny that I'm in mobility now, because my first kind of full-time role when I was still in university, I worked at a front desk at a hotel. So mobility to the core.
I did exactly the same thing, actually. There you go. First job, hotel receptionist.
That was me. Would you like to check in today? Welcome to the Fairfield Inn.
That's it.
And my boss there, I still remember his name, Ruben, and I was in high school and I thought I knew everything, and I was, you know, but I was really vocal about my teenage angst and what was going on in my personal life. And he was like, Ursula, that's not necessary. You need to stop that. And, you know, if it were my mother telling me that, I probably would have ignored it. But because it was my boss at work, I stopped and I thought, yeah, maybe he's right. Perhaps this is not, you know, something that I should be doing. And ever since then, I've kind of created a bit of not a boundary, but a safe space for my personal life and what's going on. And I share what I want to share, but it's not like an open book for everything, because that's just not necessary.
Yeah. And when you and I were talking about it, you were quite proud of your achievements in that personal environment. But as you said, you know, somebody else looking in doesn't necessarily see it in the same light, especially at that age.
Yeah. He was the first person that talked to me in a not straightforward way, but he introduced the idea of your brand in a way. And he was like, Ursula, everyone who knows you and meets you doesn't need to understand, you know, that you're, you know, this cool hip teenage kid doing this whatever. That's not important. What's important is what you're doing at work and the value that you're bringing. And so, yeah, he was the first, and brand is really cool now and topical. But yeah, he taught me that lesson when I was just 18.
There you go. So how did you get into the talent mobility industry?
Yeah, I kind of just happened upon it. I moved to Sydney. I was studying, and I was a student, and I could work, and I needed to work, because I don't know if any of you have ever paid rent in Sydney, but it's very expensive, so you need to work. And I decided, okay, I'm going to try to get a job at a global firm that's going to give me an opportunity. If I go back to the US or whatever I'm going to do next, I'll be able to go with this role. And so there was a casual role at KPMG, as I mentioned earlier, doing the data entry for tax returns. So it's funny, we have all this technology now, like we've automated so much of the tax return process at KPMG. But when I was there, people used to handwrite the instructions on a piece of paper, and they would give it to us, and we would then do it in, and then we'd print it out, give it to them, and they check it and write red marks all over it when we made mistakes and hand it back.
Yeah.
So I spent some time doing US returns. I think being in mobility, my accent is actually an asset, whereas I think in a lot of professions, you can kind of be seen as an outsider and, you know, who's this person? She's not really like us. But in mobility, having an accent is you know, it makes you be able to connect with expats more readily. So it was really useful. And yeah, so I did US tax for a while, and then I lived in Perth for a while. So I moved and had some time Perth and then came back to Sydney. So yeah, I kind of happened into this spot, and it just made sense because I was an expat myself and I enjoyed it. And tax is useful for everyone. So everything that I learn every day, I'm like, ooh, I put that in my back pocket and take it out later when I need to use it myself.
It's so true. It's so true. And look, on a journey of yours, I'm sure there have been times where you have had to deal with criticism. We've all had to deal with it at some time in our lives. How have you actually dealt with it? How do you deal with it even today?
I think we're all on a journey of self-exploration. I look at my mom and she turns 70 next month.
Wow.
And I think she's even in a way still figuring out who she is, and it's changing all the time. And so I think understanding who you are and where you are at that time, you can get feedback and kind of process it a little bit. And I was telling you earlier, Ursula's a strong flavor that some people might not like. So I
love that, a strong flavor. I think that's just wonderful.
And I have to just be aware of that and understand, particularly working in a profession sometimes where there are, really introverted people, extremely brilliant people who don't live life on, the outside at 10, like I might sometimes. So I think, it's being self-aware and then taking that feedback on and understanding how I can still be Ursula and myself, but in the right context for the right audience.
Yeah, yeah. When you stop and you have a bit of a think about your leadership style, Ursula, is there anything in particular that sort of stands out? Is there sort of something that you've deliberately nurtured over the years to help you get the most out of yourself and obviously also out of your team?
I think as time has gone on, it's probably been a regression towards more fun. So I think when I look at my son, he's 7, and if he's not having a good time, then everybody is aware of it, and you got to mix it up. And I think we try to repress that as adults, but we really just want to enjoy what we're doing. And so what I've done with my teams, previously I was leading a really big team. We centralized our compliance work in Sydney, and I was leading that team, and it was like 35 of us. And so figuring out ways to keep work exciting, figuring out ways to keep it fun so that people enjoyed the time that they spent with us became a priority and became part of the culture that I wanted to create. We spend so much time at work. And so making that enjoyable is a priority for me. And I think if you're taking care of your people and it's fun and they like being with each other, then they're going to stay. And so that's kind of what I've tried to. That's it's a weird leadership style, but it's a good time, and I think that energy keeps people coming back for more.
It does, and I tend to agree with you. I think if you can enjoy it, people will stay. People will rally around you because they want to be there, and that's that's what we all want, isn't it? We spend a lot of hours doing our day-to-day jobs, and we just want to be in a place where we want to be. So if we have a bit of a think about women and in leadership roles, what do you think is the best way to advance women into leadership roles? I know in KPMG there's been a huge change over the years, but from your perspective, what do you think?
I think it's about bringing them along, and I have my favorite piece of advice I like to give to people, because I like it to be practical, is when you're in a meeting, if there's not women there, and you can even take this out to culturally diverse people as well, but if there's not a woman there, then perhaps you should get one there. And it doesn't have to be that then there's the argument, oh, there's no qualified women at this rank, blah, blah, blah. Well, then let's bring someone up. Let's give someone an opportunity who's a grad to sit in on the meeting, so that they can learn and observe what's going on, so that they can be seen to people who are more senior than them and get opportunities in the future. Yeah, so my advice is, if there's not a woman in the meeting, then get one there, and be so bold. And so maybe it's not possible to stop the meeting and go get a woman, but then call it out. So I was telling you the other day, I was in a tech meeting, And we were, having, everyone arrived and I was the only woman. And I was like, well, it's nice to be the only woman in this meeting. So don't be afraid to call it out. I think the more that we, put it into the mix, the more it brings it to the fore and everyone is forced to think about it. And then you can back it up with, well, maybe next time we should bring a grad along so they can experience what it is that we're doing in this meeting, or, pause and say, is it okay if I just go grab one now? And invite them to this call right now. I think it takes a bit of courage to say things like that, but the impact that it can have, I think, is really long lasting. Imagine if, those males that were in that meeting that I was in, they probably thought, well, probably Ursula's a bit cranky today, but they also thought, well, there probably wasn't any other women. And what would it feel like if I was the only man?
Yeah, and it's interesting when you say just to bring someone in so they can watch and they can observe. I think that's one thing that over my career, I don't think I've seen it enough of. There's always been this view that you need to contribute or they need to be there to be sharing their wisdom. But actually, the way people learn is to watch and to learn and to mimic what they're seeing. And so being able to bring them in and just have them sitting in the background, a shadow, is incredibly valuable for those people.
Yeah, I remember when I was a grad, I probably went to hundreds of tax briefings. And that's how I learned to then do them myself and get comfortable. So yeah, sometimes the first step on the journey is just sitting there and listening.
Yeah. How do you manage or how do you measure success, Ursula? And what is success?
Oh gosh, probably sounds cliche, but I want to be happy. I want to feel like what I'm doing is worth my time. And so I was doing this thing for a while where I love to-do lists. Like my phone, like on my memos is a bunch of just to-dos and everything. So that brings me joy. It sounds really ridiculous, but ticking off the things on
you like a to-do list? That brings you joy. That's sad. Although my dear husband would agree with you. There Jenny's got a to-do list. She's showing it. Dear Mark has been trying to get me to do a to-do list forever and a day, and I have far too many of them that I can't keep track of them. So I'm not a very good to-do lister.
Well, you have different to-do lists. So I have like my personal life admin to-do list, and then I have the work one, and then I've got one for my son and stuff that I need to do. But ticking stuff off the to-do list really brings me joy. And actually, it's kind of a way that I cope sometimes with stress as well. So if I can tell when I'm starting to get a little bit jumpy and I'm like, oh, I'm not achieving much and I don't feel happy and I don't feel like, for me, it's success. Going back to your question, success is feeling like I've achieved something, but I've made an impact, that I'm actually doing something. And so when I'm feeling like I'm not, I go back and I write a list, and it immediately like calms me down. And I'm like, oh, this is not that big. I just have to do these things. And then I might order it for a bit of extra fun. And then when I do the things on the list, I just feel better. So yeah, for me, success is actually achieving something and doing something. Like there's an analogy where it's like, if you were in a car and you were heading to a destination, if it was shorter still to sit in traffic, would you rather sit in traffic to get there, or would you rather go longer but be constantly moving? And for me, it's the go longer and constantly moving, because I feel like I'm doing something.
I love that analogy. Yes, constantly moving.
But it's acknowledging that there are people out there that would rather just sit and wait and, get there, probably the same time or maybe quicker.
Yes.
And when you're leading, it's kind of, there's different people out there and everyone can't be like me. But then, embracing what that person brings and say, all right, well, while you're sitting in your car, can you, do these things?
You still get them moving. It sounds like Mark and I are standing at the airport waiting to get on an aeroplane, and I want to queue up because I want to keep moving. I'm getting to my holiday, and Mark is sort of like, let me just sit back, relax, it'll happen. There's no rush. The seats aren't going anywhere, and I'm chomping to get on
my
the
husband
plane.
has this, and he won't like me telling this story, but he's inevitably, every time we're boarding a plane, he's like, I have to go to the bathroom. And I'm like, are you for real? Like, they're calling the plane to board right now. You certainly don't need to go to the bathroom. And then I'm sitting there and I'm like, I want to get in line. I want to do this. And he's in the loo.
I love it. Good on him. So if we look at talent mobility, because obviously, that's the space that we're all pretty passionate about. What do you think is the biggest industry change that you've seen in your career?
Oh, goodness. The biggest change I've seen in my career. Well, it's probably the impact COVID's had. And I think the most exciting and new thing for us is the broadening out of what global mobility means and how we can be used. So from my perspective, it's talking about work from anywhere with my clients and with different people out in the market. So it's not just like, okay, global mobility is a 2 to 4 year assignment and maybe some business travelers. It's everybody now. Everybody wants some mobility in their life. So and that has tax implications and, all sorts of implications, but definitely tax. So I think it's made people appreciate what we do. They can see the value in what we're doing. And it's not just seen, I think sometimes, particularly in my space, I can be seen as the person who finds risk and the person who's finding extra costs and making us pay more. But now I'm also kind of like opening the door and allowing people to go spend time with their, parents who they haven't been able to see for the past few years. So I think work from anywhere and the way that it's changing the way people view mobility, both in-house and the service providers, is the biggest change.
Yeah, yeah. And would you say that that's one of the things that actually excites you the most about where the profession is heading and the impact that it's actually making?
Definitely. I think, and we were talking about women earlier, but I think people at ESG is probably the second biggest impact I see on the mobility industry. And people are really starting to think about it. They're saying, particularly with the E and the S. And so from an environmental perspective, there's some people that I follow on LinkedIn who are really having some good insights. And there was a webcast the other day where they're talking about how we can make our moves less impactful on the earth. Like, how can it be lighter? I'm having just moved myself from Sydney to Melbourne. We instead of just like dumping stuff at the salvos, I actually rehomed a lot of my goods. And by that, I mean, posted it on Facebook Markets, and then the people came and got the stuff. So yes, it took longer and it was harder, but I know that those people are going to use those items instead of, them maybe just ending up in landfill because they weren't perfect and not able to go into the shops. So I think the E is really important, and the S is super important because I think people are starting to think, well, who are we sending on these assignments? Is it only, senior executive males, or is it a diverse group of people? Because if we see historically, people who kind of move around some organizations globally are the talent pipeline for the C-suite. And if you don't get women and diverse people moving through those expat ranks, then they might not be so easy to actually enter the C-suite. And so I think having these conversations and global mobility being part of that diversity and inclusion conversation, and that S, and how we actually, I think we have to be really bold with how we say it, because otherwise we'll just be forgotten and it'll be like, well, whatever, we need this person there, so just send them there. But I think we have to be really thoughtful and considerate about who we're sending on assignment and making sure that it makes sense.
And traditionally, the global mobility function has not been the one that HR or the leadership would go to seek that type of input. So this is a question you and I haven't discussed, but I wonder, what or how our global mobility practitioners can take that leap forward to actually bring ESG onto the agenda, because I think sometimes they've been so pegged into into this box that ESG has not been part of that discussion. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but maybe moving them forward.
I think it's hard to ignore data. So I was talking to another colleague, and she was looking at our KPMG data to understand who was taking advantage of the work from anywhere and what that meant. So I think if you want to be a part of the conversation, then you got to figure out how you can look at the data that you've got. And if you're not collecting some, then start collecting it so that you can say, why is everyone that we're sending on assignment man or a woman, or why is it unbalanced? And who's getting these opportunities to get the growth and the development in the earlier in their careers? I think when you come with that data to that conversation, then they have to listen to you.
Yeah. And look, I used to find personally that as a provider, that was actually one of the areas that you could really add value. If your client wasn't tracking that information, then actually going into your quarterly reviews and not necessarily just saying, well, this is what we did and this is how we did it, but actually taking data and dissecting it and saying, this is what's happening in your talent program. It's amazing that all of a sudden you bring to light something that they may not have even thought about.
I mean, you can talk about lots of things that are topical, even like the gender pay gap. How does that apply to the expats? What's happening? And you're, like you said, the service provider. We actually did it. One of my fellow partners did it for one of his clients the other day, and they brought it to their quarterly meeting around, well, what's really going on if we look at a gendered perspective on our data and our expats. And they didn't necessarily have all that data, but we had it because of the tax return process. So yeah, it was quite insightful.
Yeah, no, fantastic. I love it. So, Ursula, what's one simple thing people can do in the workplace right now to actually increase the success of their talent mobility programs, or alternatively build workforce capacity?
Look, I can't remember what I was going to say. We talked about these questions a long time ago, but I think what's topical for me right now is I was reading some survey data from a lady called Margot that I was just talking with this morning, and she does work on repatriation. So I think that we have to think about what happens at the back end. And to have a really successful mobility program, you don't want to lose that person when they repatriate. So how are you repatriating people? I work for tons of clients who don't even provide a tax briefing upon return. So heaps and things would have changed. And yeah, you were doing tax returns and filling out a questionnaire or whatever, but you weren't really paying attention. And then you come back and suddenly you've got lifetime loading on your health insurance, superannuation contributions levels have changed. Suddenly there's less capital gains tax, no discount that you're getting for a period of time when you're non-resident. Like, you need advice, and that's just the tax side. There's also just getting back into the community. How do you reconnect with coming back? So I think there's a constant movement of people, but thinking about how you repatriate people and really taking care of them so that you retain all that experience and knowledge that they've gained overseas is something that we potentially forget about a little bit, that could use a little more attention. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's what's on my mind right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, look, perfectly timed when you consider that we do have a talent shortage and we have a lot of people that actually return to Australia because of COVID. Margot and I've had this conversation ourselves, but it just dumbfounds me that they are having trouble finding work. In many cases, we're actually seeing them go out and set their own businesses up, which is, fantastic. But what an absolute loss for our business sector when there's just so many skills that are coming back into the country that we're really not embracing. And I suppose that really then leads to the link between mobility, repatriation, and the talent management agenda, and how global mobility practitioners can actually have a significant influence in that space if they actually put their hand up and let everyone know that they've got the data.
Yeah, look, I think there's a KPMG report that came out, and it was talking about global mobility being a part of the talent management strategy. And I think we're not just a stop, a pit stop. Oh, checklist, someone needs a visa. All right, sort them out. Go to the mobility team. I think we need to be weaved into the whole strategy of both attracting talent and retaining talent, and the repatriation is a key part of that.
Yeah, no, wonderful. And maybe our last question for today, but what's one thing that you wish leaders in other business areas understood about the risks of lack of diversity and poor talent pipeline management?
I'm going to get you to say that again.
Yep. So what's one thing that you wish leaders in other business areas understood when it comes to the risks of having a lack of diversity and not having a good talent pipeline?
Yeah, look, it's the cost of doing business. I think there's a bit of a domino effect. And so if you don't have diverse teams and people don't feel comfortable and they don't feel included, then they migrate elsewhere, like literally to another company. And then that causes more people to leave. And so I think we're in a place now in Australia, and I love the conversations that are being had and targets that are being set and the attention that's being drawn to the state that we're in. And I think people are voting with their feet. So I wish other people understood that, perhaps if you want more diversity, maybe mobility is a place where you can find that. And it also then shows that you're willing to, training and learning is always at the top of all the GPS feedback surveys of what people want. So offering and making sure, going back to that, making sure you're moving the right talent. So bringing in a manager, from South America or a woman from somewhere else and bringing them in and supporting her so that she thrives and does well. What is that going to do to all the women in your group? It's going to be amazing. They're like, we have this amazing person, and I can go on assignment. I know that it's possible, and I want to follow in her footsteps. So I think it's giving the role models and showing them if you don't do that, then they're going to go somewhere where they can see that that's possible.
Yeah, true. Thank you so much for being so open and sharing some of those insights with us. I really do appreciate it, Ursula.
Yeah, no worries.
We have a few minutes for Q&A, guys. So as is customary in our sessions, I would love you to feel free to ask Ursula any questions, or just even if you've got some comments about some of the things that we've talked about today. I can see that we've had Monique is there and completely agrees with you on the whole concept of ESG agenda. Where are you, Mon? Are you there? Still there?
I am. Yeah, I'm very passionate about that. And I think it's been very climate driven to date. And I think it's just so much more than climate. It's every single element, and mobility has more influence, I think, than organisations probably think.
I think it's going to be a very interesting space. And I'm looking forward to mobility taking a leadership role in that space, to be honest. I think we've got an opportunity, which is fantastic. Now, Harry has actually said, what's the best way men can help with women in leadership at a practical level? Thank you, Harry. That's a great comment. What do you think, Ursula?
So coming back into the office, I was talking to another leader, and they were saying that the data that we had at the beginning of coming back was partners were coming back and grads were coming back. And I think that the middle managers were at home because they're like, this is fantastic. I can take, and I agree, I can take my kid to school. I can come back. I can do dinner. It's very easy. And so I think inevitably in that situation, and not to knock men, because my husband makes dinner, but I think women aren't going to be as visible in the office potentially, as long as we're doing this hybrid thing, whatever that is where you work. And so I think men can help if they're a leader by figuring out a system that allows them to give opportunities to women at the same rate that they do to men. Because whoever's got the opportunities to hand out, they have a lot of power. So one of the ways that I did this when I was leading the team of 35 is I actually had a list of everyone on a OneNote page. And when a new opportunity would come in, I would just kind of go in order, but it made everyone visible in the same space. So it wasn't just me looking out into the office and saying, well, I can see Joe, he's sat there, and so I'm going to give it to Joe. It was, oh, these are all my managers, and I need to spread this evenly. So I'm going to go down this list, or it just made them visible to me. So I think, Harry, it's figuring out how you can make all of your staff visible for opportunities all of the time.
Wonderful. Astrid would like to know, who was your woman leader role model and why during your career?
Oh, I don't know. I've had many. As I was saying earlier, my older sister, who was quite bossy, was the first. Once I was working, we had a, within mobility at KPMG, the leader for Australia, and then the leader for ASPAC, and then the leader for the whole of the world for mobility. And then she came back and she was actually the head of tax. And so that's Rasheen Garnon. And this woman was amazing. So not only was she the head of all of these, different business units and globally at one point for all of KPMG mobility, she came back and she was the head of tax. And so she lifted herself even above mobility tax. Like, who would have thought the head of tax would be someone who worked in global mobility services?
Yeah.
But she was just amazing she was always calm, and she approached every situation with just, just this wise, just level-headedness. And I was like, gosh, if I can be like her, that would be amazing. So she's someone that I still look up to, because she made it to the head of tax, which I think is amazing.
Yeah, that's a huge achievement. Bridget would like to know that global mobility does seem to feel a very female-dominated profession overall. How can we leverage that to get more women into some of the senior roles?
Oh, I mean, other than playing dirty, I think that we go back to the data, and I think we use our ability to highlight the fact that there are not enough women in senior leadership roles. And when someone says, these are the development opportunities, and these are who we're sending out, and just, calling out, and there's not enough women, or, where are the women? And I think if you get really, really proactive, there's another partner in another firm, and he's got this list that he's watching of people who he thinks should get the opportunities, and he's just waiting to see what happens. So develop your own list. You've got an eye on the top talent, and make your own suggestions. I think for me, it's finding ways that I can make an impact that, like I said, are the success, the things that drive me. And I hate to sit back and think I have no control. So I always try to figure out a way that I can do something.
Yeah. And for me, I know that there's, there are, as you say, you're a strong flavor, and there are people out there that aren't, certainly women that are not that confident. So being able to recognize those and understand that doesn't, I think, reflect that they can't do the job. It's just that they're not going to put their hand up. So sometimes actually just having them on your list and giving them that opportunity is maybe all they need to give them that little bit of a leg up that they can then shine and take advantage of the opportunities that are given to them.
Or expose them to the flavor. So I have a grad that I took to an event with me, a networking event. So sometimes people just haven't come out of the shell because they haven't been exposed to it. So I just brought her along with me. So taking people along on the journey with me is something that I really love. Yeah. She didn't hate it. I don't know if she loved it, but she went. But I think that
best of many.
It can only be good for her to, experience a little bit. So I spend some time with her, and we'll do some of her style things, and then she'll do some of my style things, and we'll rub off on each other.
No. And look, if I think about my mentors in my career, I had a lot of male mentors, but they did exactly what you're saying. They took me to places where I had never been before. They showed me how to navigate those particular waters. So, without that exposure, I would never have had the opportunities that then presented further on, or had the confidence to know that I could deal with them. So I think being exposed is huge. Do you have any tips or tricks you use to lead teams, Ursula, when there's a mix of virtual and in person?
Oh, that's hard. One of my failed experiments, and I think you can't be afraid to try stuff. I always have really crazy ideas that sometimes people look at me and they're like, no way. But we did this experiment during COVID, where we all just kind of logged into a Teams call, because some people were alone in their houses and they just wanted to be with other people. So we just kind of sat on a call, and if you had like a joke or something came up, you could like talk to people, and they were there. We only did that once because people weren't that into it. But I think I've always led teams where there have been a couple of remote people. And so it wasn't brand new when COVID started, trying to lead a hybrid team, although there were more people of it. I think it's you always are constantly thinking about it. You have to be, okay, what about the person online? What about the person online? I'm not a big, I know people are like, if we're going to have a meeting and one person is going to be online, then everybody has to be online. I'm not really into that because I like in real life connection. So I just think of ways to blend them both. So if we're going to do a breakout, I'll use the rooms, we use Teams. So I'll use the rooms and we'll have some groups in real life doing things. And then I'll put so it takes some planning, but beforehand I'll set up the breakout room so the people who are hybrid and at home, they're in a breakout room together, and then we can come back together again. So I think it's planning what your activities are going to be, and then making sure that someone at home can do it and someone in the office can do it. It takes a lot of energy and time and planning, but I refuse to give up on just, in person, because for me, that's such a big part of the joy that I find in my job is seeing people in real life.
Yeah. Can you name one trait that you think all good leaders should have to succeed?
Can I name two?
Yeah.
So the first, I think, is going back to what I said earlier about the self-awareness. I think if you're not aware of the impact that you have on other people, then you will never succeed. If you can't see beyond yourself, then you're going to fail. And I think the second goes with that, and that's empathy. So you need to be able to understand what people are going through and see life through their eyes, so that you can, just be a good leader. I think through the pandemic, it's funny, I got a feedback once that was like, Ursula's too flexible. She just needs to stick to whatever she's saying. And then other people were like, I really like the compassion that you showed me when I needed to do X, Y, Z. So you can't always win, but if you're, self-aware and you're empathetic, then I think you're in a good spot.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Ursula, thank you very much for taking the time out today. I know you've got a busy schedule, so I sincerely appreciate it. I know on behalf of everybody in this room, I'd like to give you a big round of applause. Thank you very much for all of your input. Everyone, thank you very much for attending. I hope you got something out of it. Welcome to the Women in Leadership series, and we will be having a few more of these as the time goes on. But on that note, I'm going to let everyone head off early.
Thank you for having me, Deb. I really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Thanks, guys.